Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson. Hello and welcome to episode 109 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Today is a Hospopreneurs Plus episode where I'll be interviewing Pauline Nguyen. And as you know, on Hospopreneurs Plus, things are a little bit different. I interview people outside the normal realm of hospopreneurs, so things are going to be a little bit different. But Pauline is still connected to the industry, as you'll hear in a minute. Referring to her upbringing as training, Pauline handled a more than tumultuous childhood, escaping Vietnam by boat and surviving a Thai refugee camp to become an award-winning businesswoman, author, and international speaker. She's also the owner of the Sydney Vietnamese restaurant Red Lantern, so she's still connected with the industry with partners Luke Nguyen and Mark Jensen. On the show today, Pauline and I have a conversation that traverses everything from public speaking to spirituality. So I hope you enjoy this installment of Hospopreneurs Plus. Hello and welcome to the show, Pauline.
Hello, James. Thanks for having me. It's my joy to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. So thank you very much for joining us on the show for Hospopreneurs Plus. So this show runs a little bit differently to the regular programming. So in this case, I'm going to be asking a little bit more about you and what really drives you, why you do what you do, and exploring that just a little bit more, maybe a lot more, depending on where sort of things flow. And you've got a really interesting background yourself, got quite a deal of experience in the hospitality industry, and I want to open that up a little bit more as well. Let's take a super broad look at everything that you do, though, and ask the same question I like to ask every guest. Why do you do what you do?
Two parts, this being a hospopreneur show. I have Red Lantern. I've had the restaurant now, co-own it with my brother Luke and my husband Mark for 20 years now. I do the Red Lantern because it's in my blood. I started working full-time when I was 7. Grew up in the family businesses. My father was quite the entrepreneur. He had a video library, restaurant, cafe, ice cream parlor. He also operated a driving school on the side, and my brothers and I provided the child labor. Hospitality's been in our blood. It's been in my blood all our lives. And for my own business, I coach, I mentor, I'm an international speaker. Why I do that is the bigger purpose of pushing humanity forward, always doing work with meaning. I have to do work with meaning. And especially when it comes to serving entrepreneurs and understanding that there's new and better ways of doing entrepreneurship and doing business. Gone are the days when it's a pissing contest of who gets to work earliest or who leaves work the latest, and assisting so many business people and entrepreneurs who have made themselves sick emotionally, mentally, physically from doing business the old way. So it's very much about alleviating suffering and maximizing human potential, and all through teachings that I've experienced and learned, but always from direct experience.
There's so much to unpack there. Thank you for sharing that. And it's elevating as we talk about, universal consciousness, and that for ongoing listeners, they'll understand what it means when I describe that on the program. But essentially, that's increasing humanity. You're talking about improving the well-being of humanity. Tell us about maybe how that connection took place from an early age there. You learned a lot about the hospitality industry. How has that applied as you've grown up and you've had some incredible experiences? I want to open them out, some very traumatic experiences as well. Before we get into those ones though, just a bit of that connection there between that background with your father in the industry and as an entrepreneur himself, how that has shaped your perspective on how you want to improve humanity.
Absolutely. Look, my father, he smuggled the family out after the Vietnam War. He built a boat with his friends, and we were part of the lucky ones that escaped just after the war in the very early days, because in the early days, the Thai pirates hadn't caught wind of the bounty that was yet to come. And so they didn't know about the many Vietnamese people that were going to escape the shores yet, and we were part of the early ones. So we escaped the rape and pillaging and horrors that were inflicted on many Vietnamese escaping the war. So we ended up in Thailand, where we spent a very difficult year in a camp there. We were only meant to stay there for a few months, but we stayed there for a year. That's where my brother Luke was born. He was born in a lean-to tent. And in 1978, Australia finally accepted us into the country. So we came with nothing. And so if you can understand that my father was a very high-ranking official in the war, he was a prominent businessman, and then having escaped 9 days out at sea and then staying in a year in a refugee camp and then coming to a new country, a new environment with absolutely nothing, with two young children. I was 3 at the time. My brother Lewis was 2, and we had a brand new baby. And of course, my mother was also very, very ill from tuberculosis. There's a lot of pressure on someone with so much responsibility and with a new family, let alone a new country. And it was also his own upbringing, as well as his horrific experiences during the Vietnam War. And he suffered terribly from post-traumatic stress disorder. I didn't realize this until I wrote my first book, which was a very cathartic experience. And growing up, my father, he had nowhere to dump his anger. He didn't have the tools that we know. And he dumped his anger on my mother and then on us kids as well. So I know what fear smells like. I know what fear smells like. To answer your question, James, if anything, it taught me to have a very ferocious work ethic. It taught me all about mastery. They were always mastering whatever they did, whether it was making ice cream, making food, frothing cappuccinos, getting the crema just right or the right combination of coffee beans. Everything was mastery. They would continue to perfect again and again and again. And so growing up in that environment definitely taught me ferocious work ethic, that sense of mastery, and a big sense of being cool with delayed gratification. We knew that the rewards would come later.
How has the hospitality industry and that background differed from your other business experience? And what has it taught you that you've then applied across broader business? And when you educate other people, how have you used those unique insights? Are there things specifically that you've learned that you've then applied to other sorts of businesses?
Sure. So if we're talking hospitality, I am predominantly owner-operator. Yeah, we have managers as well. But having said this, I have to put it into context that Mark, Luke and I, in the very early years, we were working 80, 90, 100-hour weeks. We were working in the business and we were control freaks because we had these secret family recipes to protect. And no one could do it better like we can. And we see that all the time now, right? And understanding that if you're going to eventually want to have some sort of a life, you have to let go of some control. And understanding in the very early years, one of my teachers taught me that in order to not only grow yourself and not experience burnout, every business, if you want to grow the business, not necessarily grow it in the way of franchising or lots of restaurants, but grow in depth, in breadth, in meaning. If you want to grow your relationships, the sustainable relationships with your suppliers, customers, your VIPs and your team, as well as yourself and your internal ecology, every business must have 3 key players. The first one is the artist. The artist being the chef or the pastry maker or the bartender. And then we must also have the manager. And the third very important part is the entrepreneur, the one who is not necessarily seeing the business as their identity, but always looking for network connections and bigger ideas and bigger opportunities. And so having worked so hard ourselves, we made ourselves sick, in so many ways. I suffered from alopecia, a condition where the hair falls out due to stress. We'd all lost so much weight. We were tired of being tired. So understanding after all of that Mark and Luke were very much the artists. And yeah, look, we could all manage with our eyes closed. It just isn't our genius. You got to stay in your genius. Otherwise, we don't access this state of inspiration and being spirited. This is what being a spiritual entrepreneur is all about, to stay inspired and in spirit and making sure that we're surrounded by people who give us that sense of inspiration as well, rather than being bogged down and weighed down by the stuff that isn't in our genius. And so Mark and Luke very much are the artists. We, the three of us, we can do it. It's not our genius. And so we have always employed managers who just love doing that stuff. They love doing the people work. They love doing the admin. And I'm very much the entrepreneur. I go out and connect with people and create a relationship so that they come back to the restaurant. Luke's doing his thing on television. Mark's doing his thing for advocates for sustainability and the ethics of what we eat. And I'm doing my thing as an international speaker. But it all brings it back to the Red Lantern ecosystem. And that's in a big nutshell how it works.
Fantastic. So there are some terms that you brought up there that I'm not sure if they're yours that you've developed or you've learned from elsewhere. Something that came up quite a few times was operating in your genius. So what does that actually mean and how can someone identify that for themselves?
Sure. For example, I am not humanly built to do admin. If you were to stick a gun to my head, yeah, I will get it done, but I will do it with incredible pain. In order to understand where your genius is, you got to try a whole lot of different things. You can't be an interesting person unless you do interesting things with interesting stories to tell. This is why we live this life, so that we can service life. How am I servicing life? How am I gaining as many skills, as many experiences as possible? If you're a chef who wants to experiment with a whole lot of culinary techniques and cuisines, are you traveling? Are you traveling the world? Are you reading up on books? If you are an entrepreneur and you want to learn and connect with people, are you actually going out and doing something about that? If you're a restaurant manager who absolutely cannot stand to be with annoying customers, you're going to get annoying customers. Learn about human behavior. Learn how to regulate your own emotions. Learn a new skill set. And so if those learnings actually make your heart sing, then go ahead and do it. That's your lane. But I have no desire whatsoever to learn more about accounting, or to learn more about how to be an efficient admin, or to learn more computer skills. That simply is not my domain. And so many business owners, they start off the business because they're the artist. Someone said, man, you cook this amazing broth. You got to open a broth bar, or you got to open this pastry restaurant because you're so good at desserts. They love that. And then they say, holy shit, now I got to be the accountant. Now I got to manage people. I just want to be in the kitchen, in my genius, creating the stuff that I'm good at. And so understand, fish are not meant to climb trees. If you're not good at the numbers, go get someone to teach you. And, you got to love numbers. It's like, no, I don't. I can get someone who can do that far better so that I'm not wasting my energy learning something and trying to be good at something that I am physically not designed to do, humanly not designed to do.
Yes. So, Pauline, how do you know when you are good enough at that skill to manage other people in doing it? Because otherwise, they could take you for a ride. You might just, as an entrepreneur, a lot of our listeners are, if they're building businesses and they're going, okay, cool, I don't need to know that skill or ability, I'm going to hire someone to do that. How do they know if they know enough to be able to manage that person?
Again, this is absolute self-awareness, and there's a whole lot of intelligence and common sense that comes with it, doesn't it? Do you have an accountant who simply reports on the history of how you've done? Do you have an accountant who says, oh, well, last month your P&L is this. Okay, I'll tell you what this month is next month. Then you're with the wrong person. Are you with an accountant who can actually advise properly? It comes back to experience and a whole lot of common sense. We don't want to abdicate. Abdicating is one of business people and entrepreneurs' biggest mistakes. It's, I wash my hands of all of this. You deal with it. I don't want to look at it. And again, we speak from direct experience. We've been in business now for 20 years. We've had times where we have fallen to our knees, but hey, that was our training, right? And so again, it is shop around. Whatever is your weakness, acknowledge it, understand how it works, but you don't have to be in it.
Fantastic. And thanks for clarifying that, Pauline. I'm going to take a step sideways here because we've been talking about a lot of different, very broad concepts. And I'm going to try to simplify this as well. So we're going to just draw it to a head. Okay, so I want to know a bit more about who you are. Pretend you're at a dinner party. How do you define yourself when you're hanging out?
This is a question that is not so easy because no one really asks me, hey, Pauline, how do you define yourself? These days, I call myself a teacher. I have had plenty of life experiences, plenty of business experiences to be able to teach. And so one form of teaching I do is I'm an international speaker. And well, since COVID hit, that's not much fun for an international speaker, nor is it very much fun for a restaurant owner. But we rise to the occasion. I call myself these days, if you were to ask me, I teach. If anything, COVID, I've been able to learn a whole lot of new skills and bring my workshops and my groups as well as my speaking and presentations all online. And now I'm able to reach a whole lot more people from all around the world. And it is very much about telling my story, teaching only from direct experience. That's one of my biggest caveats, that I must only speak from direct experience because, we've been in business long enough. We can smell a phony a mile away. So many people can, And so it's okay, are your teachers, are your mentors, are your coaches, are they actually teaching because they've had the direct experience, or are they, life coaches all of a sudden and, they're only 24 years old and they're teaching you from a textbook?
That's right. For those maybe younger listeners or those who are newer to the entrepreneurial world, even maybe those who are more experienced but haven't seemed to be encountering those people a lot, because there are a lot of those people out there. Do you have any tools that you use to try to break down those facades of people who are trying to just get other people and they're just out for themselves?
Again, it's self-awareness, it's life experience. If we're talking common sense, really have a look at their resume. Have they won the awards? Have they been in business long enough? What are the reviews like? What is their website like? Ask around. What are their peers saying? The train's left the station. If you still think that you're living a private life, then you're kind of deluded. There's so much information out there. If you are going to invest in someone, if you are going to give them your money and your time, and you're going to be giving them the responsibility of leading you into the future, leading you into the direction that you want to grow into, do your research. Just like do your research with the accountants, do your research with the lawyers you're going to take on. It comes down to self-awareness, life experience, and common sense.
You mentioned in the previous question there, Pauline, that you've learned some new skills and that COVID's really thrown things around for you, as it has for many people. 99% of the entire world's been impacted by this. What sort of new skills have you been learning and how have you been upskilling?
Oh, I have a very awesome network and we assist each other in so many ways. And I wanted to perhaps frame all of this to say, for those who are still either in denial or still in fetal position, guys, the world's literally stopped for us to reinvent ourselves. The world has literally stopped for us to reinvent ourselves. We are now living at the most profound place in time where we are all at square one with ourselves now. It's a changing of the history of humanity, and we cannot afford to not know this. And something that I've seen so much during these times is that crisis doesn't change people, it reveals them. And how we do crisis is how we do life. And one thing I'm so grateful for is, if it's the first global lockdown in the 5,000 years of recorded human history, absolutely. But if we're going to have a global reset or a global lockdown, how lucky are we that it has happened in a technological age? Like we're on this platform now is doing a podcast. I don't even know where you are in the world. How blessed are we that we are in a technological age during this global lockdown? So get really good at understanding the technology, even in its most basic form. And so I had a very important keynote that I was going to give in Bali. COVID hit. That keynote was, as far as I knew, was cancelled. And then a few weeks later, it was moved to Byron Bay. And then the borders closed to Queensland. And then I never heard from them again because, as far as I knew, it was absolutely shut down. And so 2 weeks before I was about to move house, I got news that it was now going online, right? And so I was like, okay, 2 weeks is not a lot of time to prepare for a keynote. As a speaker, we usually get a month to be able to create and craft and rehearse to meet the brief. And so this was our training. This is what we do. And so amongst moving house, trying to connect the internet and the absolutely new skill, the new experience of, I'm now not standing in front of, a stadium of thousands or hundreds of people. I'm not in front of any humans. I now need to learn the skill to not only talk to a camera, but talk through the camera and connect with the audience on the other side. It's not even a Zoom call where you've got so many people in different panels. I'm literally speaking to my own face on the screen and to the camera. And these are all new skills, And then also how then, if I'm going to be doing a workshop face to face, how then do I take all of that and market so that I can reach new people globally? And how do I learn the skills on how to connect with someone? Anyone can speak, James. Anyone can stand on the stage and speak, but do they have mastery? Do they have the craft? Anyone can do a Zoom call, but are you so up-leveled that you stand out from the rest? And it goes the same with all areas of the business. What game do you want to play? I mean, you can ask, it's so easy to speak to a screen. What new skills do you? Sure, there are the dabblers, there are the amateurs, and there are the masters and the professionals. It's a very different game.
Interesting there, though, that just a point that I took out of that is this real-time feedback loop that we haven't had before and speakers haven't had before. When, they're out on stage, they don't see themselves on a little screen in front of them. Whereas musicians have that feedback with the fallbacks. But as a speaker, you don't really have that video of you, but now they do.
Yeah, but the feedback's different. The feedback of me on the video screen is not important. The feedback that I get from the audience, that's what it's all about. But there is no audience now. It's just me and my face.
If it's pre-recorded, for sure. But yeah, you might get the texts pop up during the video. But it is, as you described, a totally different skill set that's required to be I'm going to say people can't see this, but public speaker in inverted commas, because a lot of people can say they're a public speaker these days as well. And they've just got a channel on YouTube, or, they're going live on Instagram and they say they're a public speaker, or like you can see a public figure pops up on people's profiles. But what are some of the things you've seen as a speaker that really, and obviously you were going to this conference as well, to build on that, then what you see excellent speakers doing differently to those who aren't as good?
Well, James, I've been a professional speaker for almost a decade. So I have an agent. I belong to a management company called Ode. They represent only 20 of the top non-celebrity speakers in the world. So we have a certain reputation that we have to uphold. If I were to be able to see you on this podcast, I would be in my studio, properly lit, have clothes on.
I hope you have clothes on.
There's a different game that we play. And so that's what I mean by anyone can speak, but is it your craft? Are you masterful at it? Do you know the difference between stage blocking and emotional blocking and all that stuff that the audience may not know or understand, but they certainly feel it. It's like being a designer and you log onto a particular website and you can feel that there is a sense of design, or when you go into a restaurant and you can feel that there is a sense of design, a particular sense of professionalism that's gone. Anyone can open the door, set up a few tables and chairs and put up a sign, but has there been a sense of professionalism and design that's gone into that? Has the actual keynote been written so carefully with NLP, strewn all over it with particular cadence and timing and pauses? Is this person in front of this camera on this Zoom screen, are they sitting with the proper posture? Are they speaking in a certain tone? Or is it just how you're going? And there's a whole different level of professionalism. Did that answer your question?
It did. I guess like you fleshed it out a lot, touched on some of the things, and obviously it's not going to be a completely exhaustive list. So you mentioned the agency that represents you, and then a bit about what those keynote speakers do better than others and some not as well as others. So I think that has fleshed it out. It wasn't specifically about the conference. Did you end up speaking at that conference? I'd love to know what the conference was, if you're happy to disclose that.
Yeah, of course. It's no big deal at all. It was for Kerwin Ray. He has he's got like millions of people who follow him.
He's got a podcast himself as well.
Yeah, he's like the ultimate spiritual entrepreneur. I love what he does. And so that was meant to be in Bali. But the way he showed up and turned it all around and was like, no, man, this is not going to get me down. I'm not going to buy into this fear. And so he created and why not take my retreat online? And that's exactly what he did. And I did all of that in the middle of moving, and it was a very interesting experience for myself. But one of the things I always say to myself time and time again is, Pauline, you may be an amateur at this now, but you will be a master at this in no time at all. I will see you on the other side.
Fantastic. Pauline, what do you ultimately want to define you? Everyone wants to leave a legacy of some description, whether it's planting a tree or having a child or building a business. What is it that you're leaving in the world?
I would like to, it's a daily intention. I have particular routines and all the things that I do. I've got some Herculean projects on at the moment, but put very, very simply, for those who are ready, I'm not interested in shoving anything down people's throats who are not ready. For those who are ready, I would love to leave them with a sense of increase.
Fantastic. I feel like I do want to flesh that out, although a sense of increase makes sense with everything that you've described prior to that. And I think it sums it up quite nicely as you want things to build and grow and explore. And it's the same thing that I really talk about. Is that correct? Or is there something more to that?
We are here on this earth to do one thing, and that is to evolve. But in the evolution, it's not only the evolution of ourselves, it's also how much we can assist humanity to evolve. And this doesn't mean, whipping people who aren't ready. This doesn't mean shoving things down people's throat. And this is what spirituality is about. It's about remaining in spirit and inspired and saying, hey, I've walked through the discomfort of the fireman. There have been times so tough that I've fallen to my knees. But I'm going to stand on top of this mountain and I've paved the way for you. It's so easy for you so that you don't have to suffer, but only if you're ready, because this path also requires that you walk down a really long hall of mirrors and you may not like what you see. But on the other side, there is true freedom. So if you're ready, I will shine my light and you can come because I've paved the way. So we've got to have this sense of evolving, not only ourselves, but what have you done to push forward humanity? What has been your contribution? And there's another part of it is that we've got to do it with joy. We have to do it with joy, to evolve and to do it with joy.
Pauline, in building that and in executing that broader purpose for yourself, where is your attention right now? Where are you focusing things to build?
I have particular online programs at the moment that I've created specifically for these very interesting, eventful, tumultuous times. And I have another intake of my spiritual accelerator program. And it's because I've coached so many established business people and established entrepreneurs. And I see the same pattern over and over and over. People don't have business problems. They have personal problems that reflect on their business. And it's this sense that the happiness industry told me that I'm meant to be happy 24/7. So, well, no, you're not, man. You're meant to have this human experience. You're here to experience the full gamut of emotions. But the longer you stay in the emotion that doesn't serve you or does serve you is what's going to define you. And so we, when I say we, because there's a huge movement of it to follow the way of the spiritual entrepreneur, how to become fearless, stress-free and unshakable in business and in life. That's where my focus is at the moment, to teach and accelerate already established entrepreneurs to find more freedom within themselves, within their business. And we're not just talking about surviving during these times. We want to thrive, but not only thrive, but then how do we go on top of that again and use it to inspire, to push forward humanity?
Beautiful. And it was interesting hearing that survive and thrive. I was a guest on another show. I used exactly the same thing. So I found it funny to hear the same from a guest of my own. So thanks for sharing that one, Pauline. Pauline, you mentioned there the happiness industry, and some of our listeners may be familiar with this, some may not. It's a little more abstract, sort of a term, a little more progressive. Obviously, you deal in that space, so it's something that you discuss quite regularly and you use the term almost flippantly. Can you build on that a little bit? And is it a product of the consumerist nature of the world? And I guess post-Keynesian economics, so we don't have to go into that, but this very heavily marketing-driven world that we live in. And what's that restructuring that's taking place through your and your peers' work in that industry?
Are you, James, talking specifically about my comment about the happiness industry?
Yes.
Well, how many books are there now? And I'm a heretic. I don't follow what the masses say unless it makes sense. And you hear time and time again, the pursuit of happiness, 10 top secrets, how to remain happy all freaking day. But that's not possible. You're actually setting them up for disaster. We are human beings. There is so much to be learnt from melancholy and sadness and anxiety and fear. But the mastery comes in. This is what spirituality is all about. It's self-mastery. Spirituality has nothing to do with religion. Religion needs spirituality. Spirituality doesn't need religion. And so I know so many entrepreneurs who think that they're happy because they've got $1 squillion in the bank account, but they are spiritually bankrupt. And there is this false definition at the moment. It's this suffering that has been misdiagnosed as psychological suffering, but it's a spiritual suffering, but understanding that what do I need to do in order to feel the way I want to feel? Understanding that sadness, panic, fear, we are surrounded by triggers in our environment. Shit is always going to happen. But how then do you have the mastery to sit in the discomfort? Okay, I got it. I've now learned from that. What was that especially? Oh, that was residual shame that happened because of whatever. I've got it. I've sat there. I've learned from it. How then do I get my body and my brain and my emotions to regulate and choose another emotion that will propel me forward? And so we understand that it is not the pursuit of happiness, but finding happiness in the pursuit. Understanding the pursuit itself involves the full gamut of emotions. So then how can we understand ourselves a little bit more so that we can fear a little less? Fear less, right? That's not being to be without fear. Understanding that everything can be effortless. That does not mean to be without effort. We got to get off your ass and do stuff. But understanding that it can involve a little less effort. Things can come very easily for you when you practice a whole lot of other modalities that can get you more in spirit and inspired. And how can you understand yourself so completely, regulate your emotions so masterfully that you can remain unshakable? You cannot be easily hacked. People are trying to hack us, like suppliers, challenges, Facebook, the government. There's so many forces out there that can hack who we are at our very, very core. And so understanding that life is full of challenges as well as supporters. There's always light and dark. There's always great circumstances. There will always be terrible circumstances. But if there's one thing that we master, so that if there's one thing that we will be certain of, is how we are going to show up in the face of any adversity. And this is what leadership's all about, right? Leaders go first.
Pauline, I think that was an excellent way to round out the episode today. I want to thank you very much for joining me on the program for this episode of Hospopreneurs Plus, and wish you all the very best in the future. Is there anything that you just want to leave listeners with just before you go?
James, thank you so much for having me. It was my joy to be here. Perhaps I'd leave one sentence, is understanding that during these times, for many people who are listening in the hospitality industry, is that this is a contrasting time, and this contrast will inspire a new desire. And so understanding that we have to give ourselves new goals, new desires now. It's not business as usual anymore. It can't be. And it can't be business as best we can anymore. It needs to be, how can we do business better than ever before? Find new ways to do that.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Pauline. Again, it was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, James. Bye-bye.
This program is hosted by James Henderson, with technical production by Jake Olver. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan and Shim Phelan. Thanks to our distribution team, led by Stephanie Holland, and a special thanks to you for tuning in every week. This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.